Hi, Sarah Childress back with you. I have a question for you. How many dead women and disappeared men does it take to make a Christmas movie? Any guesses? Well, I have a theory. I think it takes at least two, one of each. And I developed this theory by watching three of the new holiday films that just dropped on Netflix: The Noel Diary, Falling for Christmas, and Christmas with You. Now, the Noel Diary centers on the blossoming romance between a best-selling novelist and a woman whose mother used to work for his family. Their paths first cross when she is searching for her birth mother, and he is cleaning out the home of his estranged mother, who, you guessed it, has just died. But really, at heart, it's the story of two abandoned people who are too scared to trust, but together they take small steps toward love and emotional vulnerability. Though the film pretty much goes exactly how we think it will, one of the things that I really like about this film is represented in the final shot, which has cinematography that makes it kind of ambiguous. Like, maybe the film ends like we think it will, maybe it doesn't. It really lets you decide. But regardless of your decision, it will involve determining if Rachel, who is the leading lady, it kicks her fiance, I think it is her fiance, to the curb. So this decision is also important if we want to position Rachel as a female protagonist, since only by leaving her fiance will she be able to undergo change, character development. In fact, leaving a man for another is really the catalyst for female character development in all of these films. So moving to our next example, which I want to take up, Christmas with You. We have in Christmas with You the lead protagonist, Angelina Costa, who is a pop star in her 30s who is being kind of pushed into irrelevancy. Her label will only keep her, her record label will only keep her if she manages to come up with a hit Christmas song. But that's proving to be pretty difficult because Angelina is depressed by Christmas. Why? Because her mother died. And also her boyfriend Ricardo is not much help either. He's social media obsessed and really is constantly thinking about the brand, their brand, because her brand lifts his brand. He's more interested in thinking about the brand than he is about her and about the work that she's doing and the holidays. But Angelina manages to find inspiration in 14-year-old Christina, whose, yes, mother is dead, but also, lucky for her, has a father who is a music teacher and a songwriter. You can't make this stuff up, but obviously you can. And her father is Miguel, who's played by Freddie Prinze Jr. Now, the film's climax involves Angelina having to choose between, let's just say, the brand and a life. And I'm putting life in air quotes too, because life is defined in a very specific way in this film. Life involves becoming a wife and a mother, living in a small town, and having what the film would consider to be a more authentic relationship with your culture. Now, that more authentic relationship would involve Angelina having to move from being a kind of brand ambassador to enacting in a domestic setting what it means to be a Latina woman. Now, what I'm seeing the movie doing is essentially asking her to trade one brand, which would be pop diva, for another brand, which the film seems to indicate is more age appropriate. And that brand would be wife and mother. Now, honestly, I mean, the thing about this film is it reminded me so much of a 1930s woman's film. For example, one of my favorites is Michael Curtiz's aptly named film, Female, from 1933. And in this film, we have just like in Christmas with You, a wealthy, successful, and powerful woman who is ultimately domesticated into her proper role. I mean, I guess Christmas really is the time for old-fashioned fun, since 1933 is being redone in almost 2023. But nevertheless, to go back to my original point, two women have to die and one man disappeared in order for Angelina's story arc to arc. I mean, mothers have been dying off or been killed off for over a century, if not millennia. And then that happens in order to kick off the hero's journey. But I need to look into how far back the disappeared men go. I mean, just off the top of my head, I know they go at least as far back as 1940 with His Girl Friday, with Bruce being one of the best disappeared men. Anyway, I love that film. If you haven't seen it, definitely check it out. Howard Hawks, he rocks. So these kinds of men like Bruce and men like Ricardo, have been disposed of, it seems to me, for necessary narrative change to happen. And they're disposed of because they represent what the film seemed to indicate are improper expressions of masculinity and masculinity's offshoot, which is humanity in general. These men, I mean, usually their values don't align with those demanded by the genre or the film's storylines, and they're in essence presented as unworthy of love. I mean, for me, the genre is tough on women and on men. For example, as one throwaway male character says to Jake, the best-selling novelist, in the Noel Diary, I mean, dude, you write men that real men can't live up to. And trust me, no living man can live up to the fantasy that is Jake Turner, the character in the Noel Diary. And that's perhaps why the disposable man in Falling for Christmas is so cartoonish. Now, this tone-deaf twist on the Kurt Russell, Goldie Hawn classic Overboard, it's kind of a textbook example on how films reinforce patriarchal norms, including films like this one, which are directed by women. So in the film, Rich Daddy's girl, Sierra Belmont, played by Lindsay Lohan, who's coming off actually quite a long hiatus to appear in this film. But anyway, Sierra is poised to marry her also rich, but incredibly superficial boyfriend, Tad. Tad's now an influencer, and he is so invested in using her again to grow his brand. Meanwhile, she's also relying on her daddy for her own living and for her own kind of work. So he has created this made-up position, VP of Atmosphere, for her so she can take her own role in his resort business. And you might be wondering, well, like, where's her mom? You guessed it. Yep, her mother is dead. And honestly, I'm not sure why in this particular film, because it doesn't involve her dad being married off to someone, which is usually when the father has to be a widower because he has to be free to marry, or at least be marriageable. And maybe it's because Sierra has to be accepted by another mother or become a mother, because it seems like as if this were Highlander, there can be only one mother in a film, in a romantic genre film like these, because it seems to me that there can be only one mother, and that mother has to be the new mother. The one that is created by domesticating the single woman, who seems to be having, at the time of the film, a fine time of her own. But then she runs up against an obstacle to her kind of independence, to her wealth, to her power, to like basically the fine life that she's living. And that's the inciting incident in her narrative act that then causes her to tumble into all of these complications and obstacles, like basically all the convoluted goings-ons that these films put these women through in order to convince them to exchange wealth, power, and even if they don't have wealth and power, at least their independence, for things like love, motherhood, and domestic bliss. Now, there's a soap opera amnesia plot that's basically, just not only a crazy kind of ridiculous storyline, but also a way to bring Sierra down a peg to get her hooked up with the regular guy who is the leading man, whose name happens to be, wait for it, Jake. Yep, another Jake. And this Jake also just so happens to be in the resort hotel business, but just on a much smaller and a much more, shall we say, sliding scale than Sierra's father. In fact, he had pitched Sierra's father to go into business with him in order to keep his resort afloat. But Sierra's father, who's, you got to love these names, Beauregard Belmont, by the way, played by soap opera star Jack Wagner, says like, no thanks, kid. Like, you're a fine guy, but I'm not going to go into business with you. Nevertheless, we know from the very beginning, we know from this moment, we know what's going to happen, because women have been traded between men to merge kingdoms and keep them prospering since time immemorial. So we can see this coming a mile away. But nevertheless, the film really isn't particularly interested in this. It's really more interested on how Jake makes Sierra a better person. And this is really where a lot of the film's energy and sort of thematic power is placed. Its emphasis is placed, because he takes Sierra from this kind of inconsiderate, fabulous person. He transforms her, or her experience with him transforms her into a more considerate, humble, and domestic person who is much more interested in seeking the approval of others and much more interested in serving others. And so as a result, she's become a real lady, and she's now matched with Jake, who is kind of a man's man, a real guy, a regular guy, because trust me, this Jake is no fantasy. So Sierra's been brought down to his level, but she's happy. And I guess that's what a bump on the head will do for you, or what happens when you're the hostage of a Christmas wish. So anyway, just a little something to think about, how even in Christmas films, they require two dead women and disappeared men. Such a body count in such a festive time of year. Anyway, hope you enjoy them, and I hope you have a very happy and festive holiday season.